now listening to the Hold Your Point podcast, a platform dedicated to discussing millennial culture and experience through a Christian lens, redefining who we are with cultural excellence and as children of the Most High, cultivating thought-provoking discussion and spreading the word of God with love. Hold your point.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Peace to the planet. This is the Hold Your Point podcast. We are the Hold Your Point podcast crew. My name is Fortunato. We got DTH in the building, DJ and Lee Strauss for a super packed hour. What's going on, fellas?
What's going on, y'all?
Hey, what's going on? What's happening, man?
What's going on, man? Good to see y'all again.
Hey, good to see y'all, man. Hey, happy holidays, man.
Hey, happy holidays. Hey. You know, every day above ground is a blessing, man. We got to be thankful.
That's right. That's right.
100%. That's definitely the case. We got MLK Day, rolling on through, man. And as this drops, it'll be dropped on MLK Day. So happy MLK Day to everybody. Remembering when Martin Luther King has, the sacrifices he made so we can have the furtherance of Black communities in certain aspects economically and socially and so forth. So today we want to talk a little bit about, Mr. Martin Luther King, and then some of just like the social justices, social reform that he was trying to bring in that we've, seen tailor out today in our times, and, how we as millennial Christians, young believers, have kind of got sewn into that tapestry of, social reform, social justice, and the fight that MLK was marching for. So first, I guess I wanted to ask y'all, what was the impact? What impact do y'all think like Martin Luther King really had in measuring it from like a 2023 standpoint?
Oh, wow. Well,
that's a good one.
Let's see. I mean, I've heard it said, and I mean, I believe it to be true, that Dr. King is the greatest American who's ever lived. When you take from when this country was founded to today, 2023, I don't think there's been an American citizen who's done more for everybody than Dr. King. When you look at the things he stood for and the way he went about things and achieving the goals that he had, I think his influence is just a different level than anybody else that has come before him or after him so far, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think for me, MLK is definitely a prominent figure in the Black community, and in probably should be in any community based on like the values that he stood for and the things that he wanted to promote in this life. I think of quotes where he said, like, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. Whatever you do, just keep moving forward. Like little quotes like that. You apply it to your life, and you're like, yo, yeah, you can pretty much, take that and apply that and do things with that and make sure that it's part of who you are, and so that you never stop going when something hits the road, or when somebody tries to stop you from doing something, or an obstacle comes your way. You can always keep moving forward. That's a biblical principle. You know what I'm saying? A lot of Martin Luther King was a Christian man, so a lot of the things that he said was biblical based. So
yep.
Yeah, I kind of want to touch on what DTH just said about Dr. King. Actually, I think he said, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, DTH, that he was one of the most beloved human beings in America, right? I guess that's what you said, right?
Influential. Yeah.
Influential. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of crazy how like people could be so fickle, because back in that time, like, he was hated, man. Like,
exactly.
That's true.
Exactly.
A lot of people didn't like him, and that's the same for honestly a lot of people who lived on this earth and passed. Like, people don't really appreciate you, people don't really love you, people don't really care about you until you have passed away. And one of the things that I will say about Dr. King is that he was a man that lived on purpose. Well, and when you think about purpose, man, purpose is what we came to this, is the reason why God put us on this earth. And when I think of, I'm gonna be long-winded, so excuse me, Fortunato. I'm gonna be long-winded on this, but when I think of purpose, I think of people such as Bill Gates. When Bill Gates started his company, he worked, they said, roughly between 80 to 120 hours a week. He was working to build Microsoft. When I think of purpose, I think of Ray Kroc, the owner of McDonald's. Well, he was the visionary of McDonald's. Y'all know the story with Ray Kroc. He wasn't the one that started. It was the McDonald's brothers, but he seen the vision of what the McDonald's could become. When I think of purpose, obviously, I think of the brothers, that was in the Bible, right? I think of some of the prophets. Like you can name any of the prophets, right? They was on purpose for God. They was doing what they was called to do. And the brother that we're talking about now, Martin Luther King, he was on purpose. Like, he literally was willing to give up his life, and did give up his life, because the purpose that God called him to do, which was the vision for us, for African Americans, for all people. Like, it's crazy. The autopsy, when they checked his heart, he died at 39, right? But they said he had a heart of a 60-year-old. Imagine that. Imagine that you have a heart of a 60-year-old. That lets you know that all the stress that he had, but still he didn't turn the other way. He still was on purpose for what he was.
Are we talking about Jesus, or we talking about Martin Luther King?
I've heard, like, people literally had a poster of Martin Luther King right up under their Jesus poster. but nah, man. That's when I think of Dr. King, bro. I think of purpose.
Yeah. That's a really good analogies, man. Who you brought up, those other people, really well said. And I think it's the part you've mentioned about him being, hated and disliked by many people can't go understated, because a lot of times you'll hear people today talk about how, we should look to Dr. King and look at the things that he said, but people forget a lot of people didn't like what he said. A lot of people did not like him. They hated him. So it's kind of easy to look now and look back and say, yeah, he was doing the right thing. But a lot of people didn't think that back then. So you got to remember that when people are doing stuff today, because sometimes
that's exactly
people are not appreciated for what they're doing in their time until their time is past. Unfortunately, they don't get those flowers while they're there. But once the time passes, you can look back and say they did a good thing.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the point I was going to bring up. Like, what I'm saying, when we was talking about, people in nowadays, sometimes we think somebody is out of their mind, or they're not talking the right things, or they're talking craziness. But sometimes we got to be careful, because they might, have some element of truth on their side. I'm not going to name drop anybody, but just to DJ's point, just to throw a little jab right here, he probably had a 60-year-old heart because he was unfortunately a chain smoker. That is a fun fact about Martin Luther King, but I love the guy, what I'm saying? He was unfortunately a chain smoker, but that's just something that, we can't always, deify some of these people, what I'm saying? There's things that, like saying they didn't necessarily do all the way right, what I'm saying? If you want to compare them, what I'm saying? People would like to compare a lot of times, him and Malcolm X, and a lot of times their approaches, what I'm saying? He had a lot of times more the peaceful approach, but a lot of times people will say Malcolm X had more of the work ethic, or the not the work ethic, but the efforts that would actually make things happen. I would say
action.
There you go, action. So that's just something I wanted to drop there.
So, like, do y'all think there's a difference between, like, social justice and the concept of loving your neighbor?
Social justice
and the concept of loving your neighbor.
Yeah, like the idea of what social justice is supposed to be for all people, and the concept or the principle of loving your neighbor as yourself.
It's definitely linked And social justice is something that MLK stood for. Obviously, the civil rights is where his 13-year tenure was within, right? And he took a lot of his tools and his beliefs from the Bible, right? Just like how you said, loving your neighbor as yourself. So that's one and the same, right? That's having equality. Civil justice and equality, loving your neighbor, that's all entwined. That's all in one. So
Yeah, I think they're definitely linked. We could talk about where they may digress a bit and splinter off into two different kind of things, but I think fundamentally, social reform does have a biblical reference, a biblical base, because I believe that the Bible is the source of truth and goodness, and if anything is good, if anything in this world is going to be good, it's going to come from that, I believe, in a fundamental sense. Not to say that there are there's non-Christians who do good things, right? But I do believe the source of that is ultimately coming from the one creator God, which is the God of the Bible. So I think it's a really interesting thing because honestly, I kind of thought that, well, let me ask y'all this first, because like, how involved have you guys been in social activism in your lives? Like, have you guys gone marching, or have you, or, it doesn't have to be marching, right? But there's other things like, what has your level of involvement been with that? And I'll start with me, right? Like, I'll say I don't feel like I've done a whole lot of that, or at least in a traditional sense, because I've never been to a march. I've never been locked up for anything that I was protesting. So I think I kind of approached it from a sense of, it's not my place necessarily. Not that I don't belong, but it's just not something that I had to do to be a child of God necessarily. But as I study more and learn more, I think there is a place for it, a place for involvement, which, I want to dig a little deeper with later. But I just want to ask y'all, what have y'all done in your lives so far?
Yeah. I mean, I was at the Trayvon Martin rallies when they had him in Sanford. And then when George Floyd got murdered, like, I was at the march. They had a march in Fort Pierce. And, I was there too. But I think, like, primarily, though, with the ones in Sanford with Trayvon, like, people came from everywhere. And, they had, like, it's like it literally brought the community together, because I think Martin Luther King Jr.'s son, I believe it was, he came out and he spoke. And then there was, like, some other couple prominent black leaders who came out and spoke and stuff. And it was jam-packed. Like, there wasn't really, like, it was just an open field. Everybody standing up for a few hours. No, like, you bring whatever you have with you. There's no water for sale or nothing like that. But it's just like, it showed you. And then, like, I've had, good close friends that's kind of, like, really been on the front lines when it comes to just social reform in their counties and their cities and stuff. So it's like, it shows me, like, there's power in, people coming together for whatever the reason is. Like, when you get people to come together and to do something in unison, then they have to listen to you, because now it's like, it's not you by yourself. Like, you got a whole group of people. And, like, I don't know if y'all seen, not to digress, but, like, a lot of these activists were getting, like, picked off or killed, like, a couple of years ago, like, in different places when the Trayvon, not Trayvon, but when George Floyd case had kicked up, and there was people marching everywhere all across the nation. Like, a lot of those activists started, like, getting, killed. So it's like, that's the piece that they don't want to see, like, people bringing people together to, signify or do change. So,
yeah.
Go ahead, Dave. I'll go. Not for me. I mean, I would say I haven't had done a whole bunch of social activism, you know what I'm saying, per se, like in the way that we're talking about it. I did do a few marches when the George Floyd stuff happened, just to kind of, you know, get the experience too. And also it was a time that, you know, that was a crazy experience. So, but yeah, not much besides maybe sharing stuff on social media, you know, bringing awareness to stuff like that. I've done, you know, stuff like that on my own personal pages, but I would say, yeah, I mean, there's other things that probably can be done, but
yeah, I mean, as far as like being a part of any, I guess I wasn't trying to be in a what do you call that, like a march, but I kind of got into it somehow because I was trying to drive to a store and I got locked in, and I ended up just parking my car and just kind of being a part of it. You know, it wasn't even planned, but it was just like they literally blocked the roads off to the way I normally get home. This was in Orlando, and I couldn't even get home, so I just parked the car.
Yeah, let me just
and I was like, all right.
He seen a mob and he joined in.
That's usually how it goes, right? And you know what's crazy is I was gonna say, like, perhaps these marches could be a little dated, but then, you know, thank God for wisdom. I listened to the brother Fortunato say, like, when people come together, that's when changes happen, and it's absolutely true. So these marches does help. I love to see more action after everyone goes home, because I think that's where the real key is now. It's like, because we got to realize, like, these people back in the day, we're talking about King, MLK, Martin Luther King, like, they did the marches, but then they also did the work after that. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like sometimes that's where we kind of drop the ball a little bit. Where, like, okay, we get together, it's exciting, we get our phones out, boom, all right, yo, we had marches, yo. But then it's only that one or two that's really trying to do something after. So the whole group kind of disappears, you know. So that's my whole thing on, like, the civil rights of, I guess you could say, well, 2023 now is. We sometimes we drop the ball in the after, what we do after the marches is all.
Yeah, no, that's facts. I want to, you know, definitely chime in on that, because when we're talking about Martin Luther King, yeah, he definitely was, you know, probably the king of marches. Not to play a pun on words, but he did that stuff. But he also ingratiated himself in the community. You know what I'm saying? He had a church. He had multiple churches. He was, you know, associates with, like, a lot of political officials, a lot of lawyers, a lot of stuff like that. He was very well connected in those circles and in those realms, and so he was able to affect some change in some areas. And I think that sometimes we got to take a page out of those books. You know what I'm saying? You know, try to, you know, vote. You know, make sure, you know, your voice is heard on law stuff and things that are going on in the community in that sense. Because that's where the change is going to happen. Like, when we, you know, a lot of times, I don't want to turn this into a political pod or anything like that, but that's where a lot of times, a lot of the power is, and a lot of the things that happen. You know, it's probably a lot easier and a lot simpler to change a system if you infiltrate that system and change it from the inside out, rather than trying to affect outside change on it and exert external pressure. You know, if you're someone who is a lawyer, you're someone that is a judge, you're someone that is a mayor, is a governor, you know, and hey, get all the way to the president, you can make some real change. You know, shout out to Barack Obama. That was my first vote.
Yeah, shout out to Huey P. Newton. That real change that happened on the inside out, and, you know, kind of. But anyway, I wanted to ask y'all too, like, do y'all think the ending of segregation was a good thing? Because it's like, well, I'll say my reasons to the end. Go ahead.
Well,
just to drop that question.
That's an interesting question, man. Because I've had that conversation with people before. You know, if it's one or the other, I'll say it's good. If it has to be one or the other, but I do believe there were several benefits to segregation. I think there's a reason. Let me not say that, but
I don't know where you going with that, brother.
No. Well, my thing is,
get the mic, sir.
No, I'm just saying when under segregation, it was separate but equal. At least that's what it was supposed to be, right? So, in the same way, sometimes you have to separate two children from with each other because they just can't seem to play right together. They steal each other's toys and whatever. So you have to separate them, and it's just for their own good. In a similar way, I think.
So you still want the white only toilet? The black toilet?
Well, what I'm saying is that in a way, because here's the thing. What I'm saying, what I'm getting at is like under segregation, I think you did see several Black communities
That's very true.
achieve very good things together until, of course, other people came and destroyed their town.
Infiltration. Yeah.
Just destroyed everything. But, without that outside interference, these people were doctors, lawyers, Wall Street people, doing, professionals. And that's not to discount other, trades or whatever, but, they're getting along, doing what they have to do, building their society. And I think since integration has happened, you have individual people who excel and do well, but I haven't really seen like a community come up since then because, things are different now. And so, it's a little long-winded, but again, I would say overall, I think it's a good thing that there's integration now. But, there's definitely a lot of things that I think were positive during segregation, if only it weren't for, the hatred of people that hated others, that caused a wrench in things. But, that's my tip.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely give a little 2 cents on that one, because I think part of that is what I was just saying a while ago. It's a system. Now that we're, I guess I want to say in the system, integrated into this system. Now you see people of color. They may get the bottom of the barrel. They may get the lesser desirable part of the system. Whereas if it were, or in segregated times, I would say there's not that proverbial knee on the neck to put a pun on it. You don't really have someone of a higher power who's working against you a lot of times. If you are, in a setting where everyone is trying to make sure you succeed, let me put it that way. If you have a higher force or upper force that's pushing down on you, it's a lot harder to succeed. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's where part of that comes from. If you had your own, you don't have anybody telling you you can't do this, or I don't want you here, or I can't tell you you can't do that, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I like what the word Lee used, the system, and I personally think the reason why I guess DTH had the opinion that he had was that when you are not ingrained in a system, you are forced to just create your own, right? But when you are in the system, although you may be at the bottom, you're still in a system. So now you're like, okay, we're cool now. Everything is fine. We may be at the bottom of the system, but we're in the system. And I think that's where I guess you can say then your backs aren't necessarily against the wall to where you don't have to worry about creating your own system per se, because like I said, you're in a system. You may not be in the place you want to be, but you're in one. So I wouldn't say, obviously we definitely don't want to be in a place of segregation, but we just need to be in a place where your mental system is woken up. I think that's the issue, right? It's just people have to just wake up their minds and just say like, hey, look, I have all the opportunity now, right? in which, well, I don't have to keep saying like, hey, you know, they bombed the doctor's offices and you know, we had all this and that going on. Like, okay, what about now? Can we get that started now? Like, we have everything in place. We have everything that we need now. Go ahead.
So hold on, DJ, real quick. So you saying there's no more victims in 2023?
100%, but there's no excuse. You can't keep making excuses. Like, the older I get, the more like, bro, I'm not really with the excuses no more, man. Like, bro, it's gonna be hard. 100% is the game is not equal. The game is not equal, but it can be done. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, my thing with like segregation and the integration, like I think of segregation as like a nice gated community where everyone has their own house and nice car outside. Nice, well-kept lawn. You know, they got their own private living quarters. And then the integration is like, you know, the housing projects, apartment complex. Where it's like we all kind of like living in this damn high-rise building. There's about 100 units in here. I can hear everybody what's going on. And it's like, I mean, I think there was some power like in the segregation thing. I think it just got flipped where it was like, some black people were just like, oh, I want to be a part of that system. They got to let us in. Like, it's not fair that we're not a part of that system. And, you know, just made it seem like they had to be a part of it. And then there was an element where from the other side where it's like, for the folks who didn't want to be a part of it and was thriving, then they got pressure from other, you know, outside forces because it's like, oh, well, they're not wanting to kick themselves over to get over here like the rest of them. They're doing their own thing, and we still don't like that. And so that's why I was thinking, like, to DJ's point, like, I mean, yeah, there's not a whole lot of excuses, but they rebuilt elements of the system from that example that would ensure that, you know, these certain things don't really happen again. Because, you know, Dr. Umar, the good electrified brother, Dr. Umar, said a couple of times. Yeah, but he said a couple times, like, there's no city in America that has like a black-owned bank, black supermarket, and a black school.
Hospital.
And it's like
there's a supermarket, but go ahead.
Yeah,
but I'm saying all the elements that it would need to create a thriving community, and it's like, you know, yeah, and it's like ever since like those Black Wall Streets, and that's not even one. There was a bunch of different cities that were thriving and doing economically well. And a lot of them got turned into lakes and rivers. Well, I don't know about rivers, but lakes for sure. Like they flooded the cities out and just turned them into lakes that people just drive by now. And so it's like, so now the system was just redesigned to make sure that those opportunities don't really happen again, unfortunately.
That's the thing, man. And
go ahead.
Nah, well, I was gonna kind of pivot a little bit because I was saying I think. I had a question, which was, do you guys think it makes sense for Christians to be involved in social activism or social reform? And I think we kind of saying yes for the most part in a way, right? So then from then it goes to, you know, what are the ways you think we can be involved? And the reason why I brought that up is because in kind of, you know, thinking about us talking about this tonight, I was trying to find biblical support for social activism because, like I said, myself personally, I haven't felt a pull to join marches or do a whole lot of stuff personally. But as I'm, you know, again, growing and learning, you know, I think there's biblical support for that in plenty of different places. But I'll just bring up this one real quick. Proverbs 31:8-9. It says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. For the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy." I mean, that right there is pretty clearly describing, you know, actions that benefit others besides yourself, which I do believe is a major tenet of Christianity, of course. But and I guess that's why the question is like, what are the ways you think we can be involved? Because does it have to, what do you think it looks like to be involved in activism or reform? That's kind of my question.
I mean, I think we can be involved in just about like all levels of it. It's just like how we conduct ourselves. Like, like you could be at a protest, but, even if you're on the front lines, like, don't mess around and become the person who's now screaming in the officer's face. And, you know what I'm saying? Like belligerent, like this, like be peaceful about it. Like, I think you can still stand for what you believe in equality for all, brothers and sisters on both sides and, be peaceful about it. But I think like there's certain places that, we can't go to. And I don't really want to get it too political, but like I think like there's certain offices that like a true believer of God is not going to be able to hold in all, like, I guess truth or honesty or righteousness. That's the word I'm looking for. Like in all righteousness, because it's like there's certain elements that's designed for them to like be less than truthful. So it's like, and you can't do a whole lot about it. So it's like there's a certain height that you can go to as a Christian when you fight in social. We're looking for social reform when it comes to offices and stuff.
That's real quick, y'all. That's an interesting thought. Yeah. Interesting thought, because I didn't expect to hear that. What about I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me? You're not able to ascend to those heights. You don't think?
But I think we got to use wisdom with the word. We talked about exegesis and eisegesis again, like at church, matter of fact, 2 weeks ago. And it's like, I think that would be the eisegesis form of it, of thinking like you can do absolutely 100% all things through Christ who strengthen you. But it's like, in a sense of wisdom, like it's doing the things that are righteous. And so like if you go into a predicament and it's designed for you to be less than honest or truthful or just, then it's like, you kind of signing off on like the things that you like don't want to be, I guess, if that makes sense.
I got you.
Yeah, no. Okay. Yeah, no. To get back to your question, DTH, real quick. I mean, I think it was more lines of like where a Christian falls in with social activism and stuff. Yeah. I think there's definitely a place for Christians in social activism. I mean, we think about verses like, love your neighbor as yourself. There's things that you can apply in the Christian life that you can think about in the same social activism. If you don't want something done to you, if you don't want to be treated a certain way in society, if you don't want to be, have a certain hand dealt in society, then, why would you do that to somebody else? So that's something that is, a biblical principle that can be applied to social activism and can be explained to people who, see the other side of it, think that, certain social groups should be put down and be lesser than. And there's definitely, parts and elements of that you should be in your Christian life. If you're not standing up for that stuff, then I'm not sure how, Christ is going to look upon you,
It's almost like the example with the Good Samaritan. Exactly. And like, how all those people like, left the man on the side of the road, and it was but one who kind of like, stopped what he was doing for a moment to kind of help somebody else. So yeah, I think it's the same regard.
And it's not even just that. Like, went back with that story, the Samaritans and I can't remember what other group, but I think it was the Jews. They didn't like each other. That was a separation in those times where those two groups of people were not in tune with each other, and he saw him as a Samaritan, and he saw him as the other side, and still decided to extend a helping hand, and that's what we have to do.
Well, that makes sense, because I think for me, the way I kind of viewed social activism was a lot of helping people get rights. And for that, because I mean, a lot of it, if you look in the past, when there's been movements for things, women's movement, civil rights movement, give us the right to vote, give us the right to do this and do that. And for me, the way I view my worldview, being a Christian, and that's not to say all Christians look at it that way, but truly it's all vanity, right? So like my thing is, okay, you're getting the right to vote when this world is going to end anyway. So I'm not saying it's not important, but I guess not to be morbid, But it's true. I mean, ultimately, if you're a Christian, that's what the Bible teaches. Like if you're living for this life, that's gonna be you're gonna have some disappointment because this life's gonna come to an end. That's what the Bible teaches. But what I'm saying is, as I'm evolving on my understanding of social activism, social reform, the way I see it is kind of like what Lee just described with the Good Samaritan, right? It's doing these things, following these principles of the Bible. But my thing is, the goal shouldn't be so that someone has the right to do something. My thing is, bring them to Christ. That's really it, right? So I'm showing you love. I'm helping you overcome poverty. I'm feeding the poor, visiting the sick, visiting those in prison, so that I can bring y'all to Christ. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of how I'm starting to view it now and understand it. It's not just so I can help people get the right to vote, because I mean, to me, it's good, but it's not the ultimate good.
That's not exactly.
So,
yeah, it makes sense. Yep. All right. Well, I mean, one of the last things that I wanted to ask y'all, I don't know if y'all had any other questions, was like just to like do like a quick analysis, because I know we mentioned it a few times before, but a quick analysis of like society before the inception of hip hop and society after, like where we are now with hip hop, because like we talking about times where Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Huey P. Newton. I'm trying to think of some other, Jesse Jackson. Well, Jesse Jackson's a little questionable, but I mean, it's like we talking about a time where it's like before the birth of hip hop, which came in like, the 80s. And so it's like after hip hop, like there hasn't been like a whole lot of leaders that, at least that I can kind of readily rattle off, that's like kind of stood for the same things that some of these other gentlemen have had. So what do you think like the role of hip hop has played in our society in regards to Black leadership?
I'll chime in here. So, in my opinion, our leaders now are the cats that play football, basketball, the rapping cats. Like, as far as when I say are, I mean the guys of the dark pigmentation, the Black folks, right? There aren't any like specific leaders. I mean, you might have your guys like how we was talking about Umar Johnson, Dr. Umar Johnson, and other guys, but they're kind of more extremists, right? They can't really like be like, I guess I can say like split the middle, right? They're really radical guys, so they'll be kind of hard to be the representative of Black people. So unfortunately, that's our representation. It's the Kyrie Irvings. That's what we got.
I was going to bring up a point just like that. I mean, it's like we were saying earlier. It's part of the system that I think is a lot of times the system wants to relegate us that the only leaders we can have are the people that can dribble a ball or hop on a mic, and so it just needs to be we need to put different people in different positions of power, and definitely I think the rise of the hip hop rise has definitely probably had some adverse effects on the African American community, with a lot of the messages that are promoted out there and a lot of things that are considered mainstream and considered popular. People are flocking to these things, and it's just, I think it's causing a detriment. It's causing a real negative effect. So, fortunately.
Yeah, I'll say, I think there's kind of different phases of it. I think when hip hop first started, I think it brought a light to a lot of what was going on in these urban communities, and it was a very positive thing, I think, honestly, because it helped bring awareness to that. But I'm not so into hip hop today, so I can't really say too much. I don't think they're talking about a lot of the same things, so I don't know that they're really having that same kind of impact. Although there are a lot of brothers and sisters who are doing a lot of philanthropic activities and helping out with communities and things like that. But hip hop definitely made an impact, not just within the Black community, but the world. I mean, look how everybody copies Black urban hip hop culture. You know, whether it's the way they dress, the way they talk, their music, their dances. You know what I'm saying? So it's definitely had a huge impact in that way. But you know, I heard a quote one time that said, because we're talking kind of about like where are these leaders right now? You know, like where's the next MLK and things? It goes something like this. It's like bad times create strong men, and then strong men create good times, and then good times create weak men, and then weak men create bad times. And so the cycle kind of continues. So it's like, you know, things are much better now compared to how certain things happened in the past, right? But when they get too good, and when we look at it now, like masculinity is under attack, man, from
talk about it.
Third wave feminism, and you know, a lot of the things that people are pushing is like toxic masculinity. The word masculinity itself is a bad word now, which is ridiculous, right? So like, men are being told that you to be weaker and things like that. So as that happens, you know, it'll be worse for society, I believe, and then it's gonna just take a couple brothers to step up and turn things around for the better. So, but we might be in those good times right now, which is why we're not really seeing a lot of those brothers stand up.
Hey, let me ask y'all. I know y'all heard me talk about purpose earlier, but is there anything stronger than purpose? Like, and you know, just real quick, y'all don't have to get real deep with it, but do y'all think there's anything stronger than that?
Without a purpose, you just walk in the earth aimlessly. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like once you know what your purpose is, then that's the driving force of your life, because then it's like, you know, everything that you do is trying to align with your purpose. It's just like, you know, taking the time to figure out what it is, so you're not burning a whole bunch of energy just doing, you know, nothing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The power of will is super incredible. The power of the mind is super incredible. You know, we see how many times somebody puts their mind to something and they're able to accomplish something incredible. So I think purpose is huge in what we got going on.
All right, so there you have it, man. We talked a little bit about Martin Luther King, a little bit about social justice, social reform, and the place that it should have with us as young believers. You know, some of the things that we should be kind of focusing on that aligns with the precepts of the Bible, and, you know, just areas of caution when it comes to kind of jumping off on the deep end with certain things that, you know, are of the world, because we are in the world and not of the world. But, you know, in this time, man, just remembering Martin Luther King today, just, you know, try to do something kind for somebody, whether it's just one thing, you know, something small, and that way we can kind of pay it forward together, you know, through social justice and social interaction, man. So this has been another hour with the Hold Your Point podcast. We are the Hold Your Point podcast crew. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere you find us at, man. And until next time, we are out of here.